Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to what promises to be an extraordinary evening. On behalf of the trustees, the staff, the volunteers, and all of our benefactors, it's a pleasure to welcome you here this evening for what should be an extraordinary event. It's an honor for us to welcome Commander Scott Kelly, who I'm sure is going to thrill us with stories of his escapades in space. We're grateful for his service to our nation, and we're looking forward to his talk tonight with great anticipation. It's hard to believe, but in a few years, we're going to celebrate 200 years as an institution here in Philadelphia. And our mission, refined over the years since the legacy of Ben Franklin took root, is to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology. This speaker series has been a tremendous success for us, but I can't think of a better event to bring all of these things together. It's great to look out in the audience and see so many young kids. It's hard to believe, but next year will be the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing in July of 1969. So we've got a little bit of a generational divide between those of us thrilled by the exploits of the Mercury, the Gemini, and the Apollo astronauts through the shuttle program to the space station today, and the kids who haven't had a chance to see some of that. It's just not covered the way that it used to. But if you reflect a little bit on what the space program has done for us from those early days until now, your GPS, your cell phone, remote sensing satellites, communications, weather prediction, all of those things came to being because of the space program. You've got advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, propulsion, robotics, all of those things germinated during the space program. It was something in search of multiple solutions that came to fruition, and it's an extraordinary story. Tonight, we're pleased to host this event in cooperation with our partners at the World Affairs Council. Those of you that know this great venerable institution, for 70 years it's been the Center for Policy Discourse in Philadelphia, offering nonpartisan educational programs for people of all ages. And indeed, it's an honor to host this with them. Their motto, "Democracy deserves discourse," I think speaks volumes, especially in this environment. And speaking of inventions out of space, who could get through life without Velcro? Yes, it's true, Velcro did come from the space program. So welcome. It's going to be an extraordinary program. With that, I can't think of a better person to talk about science communication than our own chief astronomer, Derek Pitts. So help me welcome Derek to the stage.
Thank you, Don. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our program tonight. As you can probably well imagine, I am somewhere between Geek Town and Nerdville. I'm telling you, what a day it's been. We're very, very pleased to have our guest with us here tonight. I'm just going to take a few moments to talk about spaceflight because I really want to devote as much of the time this evening as possible to Commander Kelly on stage here presenting his adventures to you. When you think about spaceflight, when I think about spaceflight, I think of it as the most imaginative, exhilarating, and perhaps the most dangerous exploration taken on by humans. We've always dreamed of what it would be like to float among the stars and planets of our cosmos, and beginning in 1961 with the flight of Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin, we've been stretching our reach beyond the planet and out into the solar system. Uncrewed spacecraft have now visited every planet and even a few dwarf planets, a particular notable one. Hopefully we'll come back to the fold sometime in the not-too-distant future. And this has been helping us to better understand the nature of our celestial neighborhood. But the real adventure came when in 1969, 3 Americans set foot on the moon, opening the door to a new realm of exploration. The trip to the moon is a relatively short one, actually, just 3 days out and back, but still more challenging than almost any other human endeavor, and the chance to return the moon, and perhaps to go further, is tantalizingly closer now than ever before. But it will take a lot of ingenuity and courage to start again. And tonight, we're honored to have someone with us who has made an enormous contribution to taking that next step. During his record-breaking year in space, U.S. astronaut Captain Scott Kelly Commander Scott Kelly captivated the world while laying the groundwork for the future of space travel and exploration. An American hero whose contribution to humanity is as far-reaching as his out-of-this-world adventure, he now reveals what he learned during his 143-million-mile adventure, including lessons on leadership and teamwork, personal stories of perseverance, and the path that led him to secure his place in history. From U.S. Navy fighter pilot to record-breaking astronaut, Kelly draws from his experiences to deliver unparalleled life lessons, fascinating stories, and candid commentary on his epic journey, all sure to provide us all with a new appreciation for time and space. If you haven't read the book yet, wait until you do. Talk about fantastic stories. The book is chock full of them. So join us now while we watch a short video prior to welcoming Commander Kelly.
Throughout history, people have done things that are risky. Even though it is a risky thing to be doing, and I think it's a lot more risky than some people might think, I still think it's worth it.
Astronaut Scott Kelly will try something no American has ever done before. This spring, he will leave for a mission and spend a year in space. His twin is former astronaut Mark Kelly.
Genetically, the brothers are almost identical, so scientists will be able to measure how Scott and Mark change physically and emotionally as months pass.
Warm up a little bit. This one's a bit of a Hail Mary. Here we go. Boom! Astronaut Scott Kelly at the International Space Station.
Scott Kelly has been working toward this mission his entire career. He's been working toward this mission his entire life in some respects.
I decided that the challenges staying in space for a whole year presented was appealing to me, even considering the sacrifices.
The human body was made for living in gravity. Strange things happen to us when we spend long periods of time without it. But that never deterred the former Navy test pilots from dreaming of becoming astronauts.
Pretty much anything we've ever put our mind to, we've been able to accomplish. Doing pretty good. I do feel like I've been up here for a really long time, and I look forward to getting home soon.
Interesting to watch. What a
Cool story.
great story and a fascinating experiment.
Space is still the most exciting thing I can imagine, and talking to someone in orbit still is, it's like I am an astronaut right now.
Are you concerned about the toll, the physical toll that this will take on you?
I do think about the effects of radiation. You know, the reason I'm here is to learn more about it, so someday we can travel further from low Earth orbit than we ever have before. A year is not short, but it was very rewarding. It was enjoyable. It was something that I feel privileged to having got to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Commander Scott Kelly and Craig Snyder, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia.
Hello.
Commander, thanks so much for being with us. Somebody doesn't just one day wake up and get asked to go spend a year in space. A lot of people here haven't had the opportunity to read the book. Tell us the path you took, the previous missions. How did you end up in this experiment?
Yeah, I'll tell you that in a second, but first I'd like to say it's great to be here in Philadelphia. Actually, it's great to be anywhere with gravity. You know, on the space station, I changed positions so many times. You would have thought I was running for president. Hey. So anyway, to those of you in the audience that do not appear to be space aliens, I'd like to say good evening. And to the rest of you, I come in peace. So to answer your question, I'm a very atypical kind of person that became an astronaut, because when I was a kid growing up, I was a really, really bad student. I was the kid that, you know, sat in the back of the room, didn't pay attention, looked out the window, wondered what was going on outside, or, you know, looking at the clock, trying to just make it run faster so I can get out of the classroom. And I know there are kids here, so don't listen to me. Because it's hard to recover from being a bad student and not being able to pay attention. But that was who I was as a kid, and I struggled through middle school and later high school. Graduated in the bottom half of my high school class. Went to college because that was what was expected of me to do. But I actually went to the wrong school. I don't mean I went to like this school over here thinking that this one was a better fit for me. What I mean is I applied to and showed up at this college thinking I was going to this other one over here. I am quite possibly the only person that has ever really gone to the wrong college. And I'm there my first week and I say like, hey, when's the football game? And they're like, we don't have a football team here. It's at other school in Maryland. And I was basically doing the same thing I did in high school. I couldn't pay attention. I didn't know how to study. Eventually, I'm not really even going to class anymore. Basically on the fast track to, first year college dropout. And one day I'm walking across the college campus and I just happened to go into the bookstore to buy gum or something. Not a book. Was not a big reader at the time. But I go in there and I see a book on the shelf and it's got this really cool cover and a cool title and just made me pick it up. And I looked at the back and I read the back and I was interested enough that I bought this book, which turned out to be The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe. And it really just spoke to me, and I recognized, these guys had certain qualities in them that I felt like I had myself, but with one huge exception. And that is I didn't know how to learn, I couldn't study, was not a good student. And I thought, if I could just fix that one thing about myself, become a better student, learn how to learn, maybe I could be like these guys someday and fly airplanes in the military, maybe even become a test pilot, and possibly an astronaut someday. And you know what you're thinking? 18-year-old kid, he or she reads a book, decides that they're going to become an astronaut. That's a giant leap. But really what it was a bunch of, smaller, manageable steps to get there, one built on top of the other. That started with something that was really hard for me, which was teaching myself how to become a better student. But then, always got a little bit easier.
Fabulous. Okay, so let's jump ahead to the year in space.
That's a big leap.
It's a big leap. It's a big leap. Space program's known for that.
You just jumped over like 30 years of my life.
Exactly.
That's okay. That's not interesting.
They only gave us 20 minutes. The question, I guess, that boils down in terms of your year in space is, to me, what did humanity learn and what did you learn?
Well, I'm not humanity, so I don't know what they learned. I appreciate humanity. Humanity's a tough audience sometimes. But what I learned is something I'm going to share with you at the end of this talk today. I don't want to steal my own material, but the purpose behind us going into space on this mission, which was longer than any other flight to the International Space Station before it. Generally, we fly 6 months on the space station, and we were going to fly for a year, me and a Russian cosmonaut, because someday we want to go to Mars. Mars is really far away. It's going to take 7 months to get to Mars. You'll have to spend a year on the surface, 7 months to get home. And when we are in space, bad things happen to our physiology. We lose bone mass at 1% a month. So, you know, if you didn't do anything to prevent that, after 100 months, you'd have no skeleton left. We'd all be like Gumby, maybe. Kids might not even know what Gumby is. Gumby's a little dated, like us, right?
Yes.
We lose muscle mass, effects on our vision, our immune system, and then the radiation we get in space, which is anywhere from 10 to 20 chest x-rays every single day. And what is that effect on our physiology? So in March of 2015, me and a Russian cosmonaut left the planet to spend a year on the International Space Station to learn about these things and other things. And we did learn, you know, we learned a lot. There was a lot of science that was done, over 400 different experiments. Some of those, you know, I was the scientific guinea pig, the subject of the experiment, but there were many others.
Tell us about your return and the readjustment, you know, both physically and emotionally. What was it like?
So if we go to the end of the mission, there's probably no questions left, assuming this is chronological.
There's still a few.
You had some.
There's still a few.
The readjustment. So going to space, there's an adjustment. When you first get to space, people are, if it's your first flight, they're a little bit overwhelmed of the experience. You're shocked, for one thing, that you're actually in space. I was shocked more than anybody else on my first flight because it's not a place I ever expected to be in. As you know, an 18-year-old kid struggling his whole life to become a serious learner, and then for me, fast forwarding 18 years from basically the day I read the book, The Right Stuff, 18 years later, I'm flying in space for the very first time. Almost to the day from when I read that book. And, you know, I had the privilege to fly 4 times, spent a year on the space station. And, you know, like I was saying, you know, adjustment to being in space takes some adjustment. A lot of people don't feel very well at first. But for me, coming back after spending a year in space was even much worse than the adjustment that takes place getting used to living outside of this, you know, gravitational field that is very helpful to us, actually, in a lot of ways. But when I got back after being in space for a year, you're tired. You know, without gravity, all the fluid in our bodies redistributes itself. So in space, we get rid of that fluid, and when you come home, it replenishes itself pretty quickly. Your blood volume replenishes itself, but it doesn't replenish the red blood cells, so you're tired for a couple of months. You're sore, you're stiff, hard to stand up. When I would stand up, blood would rush out of my head, and my legs would swell up like water balloons, and I'm like, this is not good. I had hives and rashes anywhere my skin was touching anything, because it had not touched anything for a really long time. Some good things, actually, physically, that happen to you while you're in space, and that is, actually, there's only one good thing, I think. One good physical thing, and that is when you don't use your feet, for months, all the calluses just kind of go away. It's a little disgusting when you take your socks off and you get this big, like, cloud of foot stuff. If you're ever in space for a really long time, don't ever take your socks off around your crewmates. Very bad manners. But eventually you have baby feet, like baby feet. And after when I was on the space station for 6 months, when no one knew I was up there, I went to get a massage, and you know, at the end of the massage, they rub your feet. The masseuse was like, she goes, "You have the softest feet I've ever felt in my entire life." All I said to her was, "Thank you. I'm very proud of them." And I just left. She's probably still talking about that bald guy with the really soft feet.
I want to go to a couple of sort of space policy questions, if we could. So, when
This guy right over here on the end, he's going to love that space policy question.
I can
That little
tell.
guy in the blue
I could tell.
might actually wake him up.
I think they're up. When the Apollo flights were taking place, Charles Lindbergh was still alive. We went from flying across the Atlantic to going to the moon in a much shorter period of time than it has now been since we went to the moon. Does that mean that the future is the past? Or do we still have a future in space that can be as bold and exciting as Apollo? And if you believe that, why has it taken so long?
Well, I think we do have a future in space. I think space is our future. It's it's this outrageous goal and destination that I think as humans we need. We're explorers. We need a place to explore. We've explored most of Earth. Now, granted, we could explore the oceans a little bit more, and I think we should. But, exploring space is absolutely part of our future. Why is it slowed down, it seems? Well, the Apollo mission was not only about exploration and technology, it was also a political race for demonstrating that, our political system was better than somebody else's. So that motivated us. We currently don't have that kind of motivation. And I will share something that my brother says about this very subject that I agree with. I think it's probably one of the best things he's ever come up with. And that is, he goes, going to Mars, it's not about rocket science. It's about political science. Meaning that we need the support from the public to elect officials into our government that are science-minded people that want to do these things. So the question is really not, do we have the technology to go to Mars or elsewhere? It is really a question of, do we want to, and then can we afford it? Because it is going to be very expensive. And we have a lot of priorities that I'll admit are more important than going to Mars. And it's just, finding the proper balance between, what we want to do and what we can afford.
There's been this change in the nature of the space program to bring in the private sector. If you go to the Cape today, you see the emblems of the corporations. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think that it's going to help advance our role in space? Or do you think that NASA should remain the primary focus of the effort?
I think it's great. I mean, when you have guys that have a lot of money that want to invest their own money in the space program to give us a different way to, different mechanism to get to space and do things like promoting space tourism. I would love if I could share this privilege that I've had of going to space. I think I'm going to go back there and help them with the dishes, and then I'll be right. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but maybe they heard me. Anyway, I completely lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Space tourism.
Oh, the space tourism.
Yes.
So I think it's great. I mean, SpaceX does things differently than NASA does. Does different mean it's better? I don't know. I think time will tell. If SpaceX is able to put people into space reliably and safely at lower cost, that will be a great thing. Someday the future of aviation around the globe will involve spending a short time in space. I mean, when we can get from here to Australia in 45 minutes, that's going to be a great thing. And I think there is a place for those companies. My wife, Amiko, and I, we visited Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' company, about a year and a half ago. Those guys are absolutely serious, not kidding around. They will be flying people in space someday here pretty soon. And, his eventual goal is to get to an orbital capability. And, we'll see what happens from there. But I think it's a great partnership.
Elon Musk's Mars plan, your thoughts?
Well, Elon has a very ambitious plan to go to Mars. Involves many different spacecraft launching at similar times, putting a lot of people on the surface of Mars to eventually, I think he believes we can terraform the planet Mars and make it, more habitable, like maybe a little bit like Earth. When Elon said he was going to launch a spacecraft into space and land the first stage of the rocket on a barge and then on land and then refly it, I thought he was nuts. And then he went and did it. So I will never say his plan is crazy. I will say it's a little ambitious, but I think if anyone could pull it off, it'd probably be him.
In addition to being an astronaut, obviously you've been a military man. There's a debate going on now about President Trump's proposal for a space force as a separate branch of the American military. I'd like to ask your opinion about that. And more broadly, it seems pretty clear that space is being militarized, that both the Chinese and the Russians are pursuing capability to disrupt American communications and so on. Do you believe that space is going to be a theater of war?
You know the first rule about Space Force? We don't talk about Space Force. First rule. You know, we have a great military, the greatest that's ever existed in the history of our planet. And despite being a Navy guy, I have to admit, the U.S. Air Force does a pretty good job. Go Air Force. Our Department of Defense is also probably the hugest bureaucracy that's ever existed. And, you know, adding a seventh arm to that and the, you know, the overhead that it's going to take to, you know, start up a new branch of the armed forces is going to be billions of dollars. Is that worth the money for a capability I think we currently have? I don't think so. Perhaps somebody could make the argument that it is. Will space be a battleground for future warfare? Probably at some point. I think humans have demonstrated that over the course of our history, we will find new ways and new places to go and fight one another. I think that's pretty clear. I hope it's not for a really long time. The U.S. government is part of various treaties to try to prevent that. So I think we should probably, as the leader of the free world, set the example that we don't want to do that. But at the same time, we have to understand, you know, there are threats to our national security that come with, you know, defending the infrastructure we have in space. So I just think whether we need a space force or not, I think is a much longer discussion that we need to have rather than just like, you know, writing out a check for this. Now, having said all that, if they get the lightsaber, I'm in. All in.
With that, I'm going to invite you to the podium to walk us through some of these wonderful photographs. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Looking for the clicker. And you always lose the remote control. There we go. Hey, I'm going to show you just a few slides and just talk to them for a few minutes from my new book, not the book that was given out here, but this picture book that weighs about 40 pounds, so they didn't want to bring too many of them in here. I guess we skipped ahead. Maybe I pushed the button by accident. But this is the Soyuz rocket. We used to fly on the space station. Now we fly on the Soyuz from Russia, which is a conventional, more of a conventional rocket. And all these pictures are from the picture book. I'm not even pushing these buttons. Is someone changing this for me? It's the movie? It's on movie. You must be some kind of expert on this. Can you come up here? Can you come up here and help me? Because I cannot figure this out. It's got two buttons instead of just the one I'm used to. Anyway, this is the Russian, the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. So this picture is in my book, and I clearly didn't take it because I'm at the top. So I put this photograph in the picture book in the beginning to show me looking at planet Earth. This is the cupola module on the space station, a bunch of windows that look down on the planet. And but when you're in it, It's like you're looking up at Earth, and Earth actually looks like some alien planet in some science fiction movie when you're looking at it. This is my Russian brother from another mother, Mikhail Kornienko, and I floating through the hatch on the International Space Station, day one of a year in space. And I get inside the space station, and I'd been there 4 years prior, and the place looks the same, sounds the same, smells the same. Day one of a year, I'm thinking, man, this is a stupid thing to be doing. Spending a year in space after spending 6 months here. You can't get out, you can't come home if you want to. There's no Uber. Not yet, anyway. Someday we'll have Uber space. I put this photo in the book to demonstrate the national aspect of the International Space Station. There's in this photo alone, there are 4 cosmonauts, one guy from Kazakhstan, a guy from Denmark, 2 Americans, and a Japanese guy. Over the course of the year I was there, we also had an Italian woman on board, a Brit, and anybody else? I think that's it. A couple more Americans. But this is the Russian segment, the Russian service module. The space station is broken up into 2 parts, really big, weighs 1 million pounds, has a U.S. side that has modules that are kind of, big and bright and a little more inviting, and then there's the Russian side, a little darker, a little smaller, a little more sinister looking. I joke about our Russian colleagues a little bit, but they have been great partners in space, with us. People are often curious, do any earthly conflicts transmit to space, and I honestly say they do not. When we're on the space station, we are crewmates first, we are partners, we rely on each other, literally for our lives in some cases. This is the U.S. laboratory module, very busy. If you had OCD, it'd probably be hard to live there for a long time. But I wanted to contrast this picture with the lights out in the U.S. lab module, and you can see all the little green glows of the little LED lights and other lights that are in there, including the pink lights that are in the front of the space station, which are these from these grow lights that are part of a plant growth experiment. So it looks kind of like a nightclub in there. And you turn the lights out. I took a lot of pictures of the Earth. This book is mostly about taking pictures of the Earth, including trying to get all the NFL stadiums. I was able to get your stadium here. Is it still called Veterans Stadium? Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure they would let me take a picture of Veterans Stadium. Is it still there? I don't even know. Okay. That's probably why. The only thing I know about Veterans Stadium is the court that they had in the basement. Not that I was ever there. But this is the 49ers Stadium during the Super Bowl. So I actually saw the Super Bowl from space with a really long lens. And then, so I had decided to have a Super Bowl party. And because I was on the space station with a bunch of Russian guys that never even heard of the Super Bowl, nobody showed up. This is our nation's capital, and I included this picture in this slide presentation. There are many, many more pictures in the book, only to demonstrate the fact of the lights on the planet have, distinct appearances. Here you can see the Washington, D.C. Definitely stands out for a lot of reasons, but also because of the lighting. It's just a different, made with a different chemical, the light bulbs. And that is the case around the world. There are times when you look out the window and you can almost tell, where you are just based on the color of the lights over the planet. This is looking out in the cupola, but towards the back of the space station in the Russian segment with some aurora on the horizon. This is looking towards the front. We were capturing a Japanese cargo vehicle. We used that robot arm for for a lot of things. The most important thing is to grab our cargo spacecraft and attach it to the space station. Space selfie. But I took this and the subsequent picture to demonstrate the earth shine that you see from space. If the window covering is closed and you can't even look outside, but light still seeps through, after being in space for a long time, you can actually tell where over the Earth you are from the color, just the color of the lights. Not always, but sometimes you're like, you know, that looks like Australia, the glow of the lighting from Australia or the deserts of North Africa. So that first picture is over the Mediterranean Sea, a little blue. Just a few seconds later, over the deserts of North Africa, and you can see the yellow glow. New York City, home of the New York Giants. You guys Giants fans? No? Jets fans then? No, okay. I heard about you guys and how dedicated fans you are of your... All right. What's that? I can't, I'm not sure what you're saying. This is looking back over from basically the west coast of the United States towards Texas and back over Europe. You can see on the top there, that's the boot of Italy, and I think we're over Macedonia. I've never been there, I need to visit. The mountain of the Himalayas. I'm going through these fast because there's a lot of them, and you guys had some great questions that I wanted to get to. But you could see this was late during the day because you could tell, I knew it was late during the day because I took the picture, but you could tell from the shadows over the mountains that it was either in the morning or in the evening. And then, you know, these earth art pictures. My mother was an artist, amateur artist, and I dedicated this book to her. She's no longer with us. But a third of this book is me taking pictures, close-up pictures of the earth, with a really long lens, and then enhancing the color. I didn't add any color to them, but I enhanced the color using a software program that makes these pictures look like something you could actually, you know, hang on your wall. That is a wall-worthy piece of art, and the rest of the photos in here are like that. These are some, you know, semi-dry lake beds, probably in Iran somewhere. And then we have, you know, just some other really pretty pictures of the Earth, which are really challenging to get when you have this really long lens, 800 millimeters. You're looking at a very small spot on the Earth, and you're traveling at 5 miles a second. So you really can't take these photos unless you've been in space for a long time and developed a good technique to track the Earth. But the Earth is just really an incredibly beautiful place. And we'll continue to scroll through these slides while I'm doing the Q&A, which I think is probably, yeah. Why don't we go to the questions, and if you guys in the back can just fast forward through these slides occasionally, or switch through them.
We can sit.
Yeah, let's sit it down.
Let's do that.
Why not? Why stand when you can sit?
I noticed you were having some trouble with the clicker there.
Yeah, man, I'm technically challenged.
2 buttons there. I understand the Soyuz has a few buttons.
The space shuttle has 2,000 switches and circuit breakers.
There you go.
Some of which, when you like throw the switch or push a button at the wrong time, you can blow the thing up.
Probably not a good switch to hit at the
crewmates.
wrong time. Yeah. So let's start out at that point, at launch point. You've climbed into Soyuz. You're all packed in there nice and tight. I understand sardines have a better life in a can than you guys do inside Soyuz. You're packed so tight. What are some of the thoughts that are going through your mind as you're sitting there waiting for them to hit the big red button?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a button. In Russia, there might be.
Right? That's what I'm thinking about, right?
Probably a big like,
red.
Yeah.
It says "Da."
When you fly in space for the first time, you actually think about it and the risk involved beforehand. That was definitely the case on my first space shuttle launch. You've never done this before. It's something new, and you feel you feel like, hey, this might be the last thing I ever do. So you think about it. But then when you're in the spacecraft and you're busy or you're focused on your job, those thoughts are kind of out of your mind, and then you're sitting there in the Soyuz, which is particularly uncomfortable for some people, and it's rather painful, but there's no countdown clock in the Soyuz. Time is just passing. The space shuttle has this very distinct countdown clock. The Soyuz doesn't have that. After a while, you're like, hey, what time are we leaving? Is that like Moscow time or Baikonur time?
Did they send a text up to let you know when they're going to launch? Or?
No, eventually just somebody comes up on the radio and says, ignition. And you're off.
You're off, okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. It's a short ride to space, right? Doesn't take long. In some instances, it's a short ride to space. You've spent a couple of days just orbiting in Soyuz heading to International Space Station.
Yeah, sometimes we've taken 48 hours to get there. My last flight, it was a 6-hour rendezvous, but spending that time, 2 days in that small capsule, it's a tight fit. Incredible experience, especially on the space shuttle. Soyuz lifts off slowly, more traditional rocket. Space shuttle has those 2 giant solid rocket motors, and when those things light, you get the feeling you're going somewhere. You're not sure where you're going, but you're not coming back to Florida.
So here's one of the questions. People, of course, are very much interested in your experience being on board for a year, and they like to know, can you share what you and NASA have learned to date since coming home from that mission?
No, I can't share.
Not a thing. So what would be the biggest thing that stands out in your mind that you think is probably of the greatest value as a result of the time you spent on board?
So this is the kind of the question I want to finish up with at the end, just kind of a summary thing. So I don't want to steal my own material because I don't have much.
So have you had a chance to meet with any of the Apollo, Gemini, or Mercury astronauts?
Yeah, I've met a lot of them, and unfortunately, a lot of those guys are no longer with us, and there are less and less. But I got to meet most of them actually over the course of my career at NASA. I was selected to be an astronaut in 1996. Started in '96. When I showed up at NASA, pretty soon John Glenn came back to NASA to fly on the space shuttle, and he was there for probably about a year. As an astronaut, you get once you get assigned to your first space flight, you get a parking spot, which then you keep for the rest of your time there. And when I got assigned to my first flight was right after John Glenn got back from his second flight after he retired from the Senate, and I got his parking spot. So that's my claim to fame.
That's great.
I had John Glenn's parking spot for my whole time at NASA.
Can't beat that. No. That's the best. So does that put him like right at the top of your list for astronauts, former astronauts? I mean, if you could pick out one that you think was really
John Young.
John Young. Okay.
Which a lot of you may have never heard of. He was a very quiet yet serious guy. He flew on Apollo 10 around the moon. Actually, before that, he flew a couple of Gemini flights. Was the commander of the first flight of the space shuttle, which, as far as space flights go, and and risk and seriousness of what you're doing, you don't get much more serious than that. Him and Bob Crippen were the only guys ever in the history of our planet to fly on a spacecraft that was not previously flight tested with nobody on board. When the first space shuttle launched, that was the first launch period, and there was 2 people in it, including him. So he is, I think if you ask most astronauts who they respect most as far as their astronaut skills and dedication, clearly John Young. He never left NASA, continued into his 70s before he retired, and then he passed away recently probably about a year ago.
Right. Well, you've really hit some, how do you call them, not landmarks, but you've really hit some incredible superlatives in your time in space and the work that you've done. How about your brother Mark? Mark's an astronaut, has spent considerable time in space. Does he feel woefully inadequate, having spent so little time in space?
That's a good question. Who sent that question? What email address?
I'm not gonna out him.
Yeah.
skelly@nasa.gov. No, I won't.
Yeah, I saw that the email address up there. You could send questions.
Yeah.
When I was sitting over there, I sent that question. That's like the best question.
Exactly, right? Isn't that what you expect?
Man.
So do you think the movie The Martian...
You know, my brother has only flown in space for like 50 days compared to my 500. So actually, though, he does. You know, he's flew in space 4 times. He's, you know, I'm proud of his accomplishments. He flew twice on the, as a pilot of the space shuttle, twice as the commander of the space shuttle. And, you know, just had a different career than I did, and then, you know, went on to retire after his wife, Gabby, was shot. She was a member of Congress and was shot in the head in 2011, so after his last flight, he had retired.
You two together have quite a data package for NASA in terms of the effects of space and what we can learn from that. Your time on board International Space Station certainly provides a huge mountain of data that people can learn from. What would you think is the next kind of work that NASA needs to do to push the envelope of human space experience?
Well, someday, like we were talking about earlier, we want to go to Mars, and, you know, besides the political science, political challenges, there are some technical challenges that I think, you know, we need to figure out. One is the radiation, and the amount of radiation we get is much less in low Earth orbit than it would be on a mission to Mars. So that's a challenge that we're going to have to figure out, whether it's protecting the crew with some kind of magnetic field on the spacecraft or just getting to the planet quicker is also a solution. But I think once we figure that stuff out, maybe the life support systems. And life support systems are really important to have them reliable. If you're on the space station and the toilet breaks and you can't fix it, you know, game over. You're not going to survive. And so these systems that keep us alive are very important. On the space station, currently, we turn our urine into water, which we then drink. And we turn it into urine again. Then we drink it again. Actually, we drink it again after we turn it into water. I know what you're thinking. That guy drank his pee for a whole year. Actually, I drank everyone's pee. It's all mixed together. But it does taste better than the water in Florida. I'll tell you that. But all these things are important. I mean, if you can't, you know, turn your urine into water, you're not going to make it. So understanding the life support system, scrubbing the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, all these things, once we get this figured out, I think our next destination should be going to Mars. Of course, if we had an unlimited amount of money, then maybe back to the moon first. But, you know, money's always tight in the government and elsewhere, and maybe we can't afford that.
Do you think the movie The Martian...
Did I make you, because I was talking about water?
I think that's what did it. I'm sure that's what did it. Do you think the movie The Martian was a good depiction of what Mars is like?
Yeah, Martian was pretty, Martian technically was pretty accurate. There were only really 2 things that technically I would disagree with. One was how the crew called the commander all the time. We're more on a first name basis. And then, you know, at the end when he was drifting away from the spacecraft, I think he cut a hole in his glove or took his glove off and
used that as a way to propel himself around. Yeah.
Probably wouldn't work, but I'd try it if I had no other choice. At least it would, like, you know, get you to the end quicker maybe than. But anyway, yeah, I thought The Martian was a pretty accurate depiction of living and working in space. We watched Gravity on the space station.
Whoa.
When I was up there, yeah.
That's pretty daring.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's kind of like
How'd that go over?
it's kind of like watching a movie of your house burning down
Yeah.
while you're in it. But I mean, the physics was all messed up, but other than that, it was a pretty good movie. Space station actually looks like it does in the movie. It's pretty close.
It was a good depiction
Yeah,
of that.
very good depiction.
So the next question about Mars, of course, is, would you go?
It would depend. So there's this group called Mars One that is, the idea is you get a bunch of people together that are very motivated to go to Mars, and you can do this cheaper because you have no intention of bringing them home. I wouldn't do that. You know, having spent a long time in space, I wouldn't want to live in a module habitat for the rest of my life. I know these people seem like they would, if they ever had the opportunity, they would go do that. I'd watch that on reality TV. I think it'd be like Lord of the Flies in space, maybe. Yeah, so I wouldn't be interested in that. But if it made sense, if it was if it was the right mission, the right objectives, it was reasonably, safe as far as how safe going to Mars could possibly be. But if there were reasonable safety precautions, I'd probably do it.
And do you think that the moon as our next step is the correct way to go?
You know, I think if we had unlimited funds, it seems like the moon is a perfect place to learn how to go to Mars. It's 2 or 3 days away instead of 7 months. It's a sixth of the size of Earth, so a sixth of the gravity versus a third. Has no atmosphere versus a little atmosphere. In some ways, no atmosphere makes certain things easier. But it's all about the money. So if we can only do one thing, I would say we should go to Mars instead of back to the moon. But still, there's a lot to learn with going to the moon.
Okay. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Question from the audience is, if there is other intelligent life out there, do you think humans should try to communicate with it, or should we just lay low?
I'm all about the communicating with them.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
But-
bring it on.
Yeah. I think having a dialogue is always better than not. And I would want to communicate. Having said that, I don't think aliens visit this planet.
Thank you.
Only because, why did they stop coming as soon as we all got the cameras in our pockets? Never understood that, right?
Yeah, right.
The space selfie would be the best one ever.
would be
or
the best
the
one
alien selfie.
Right, that's right.
Better
So-
than the space selfie.
So speaking of that same thing, though, have you heard the story recently about the I should say
That
it this
cigar
way,
thing?
That big cigar thing,
Yeah.
Oumuamua, that's come into our solar system. There's some speculation from people that they think this might be an alien spacecraft of some sort.
Yeah.
What do you take away from that?
Sounds fine to me. I don't know.
Fine, yeah, okay.
Somebody from Harvard wrote a paper. It's from Harvard.
Yeah, right. Okay.
The interesting thing about that spacecraft, though, is most of the stuff in our galaxy. We have a spiral galaxy. It's all in one plane. That thing came from the top
Yes.
or the bottom, whichever. It depends
Yeah.
on which way you're looking. I
At
guess.
an odd angle into the galaxy.
Yeah, which is very, very unusual.
Yeah.
And it came from deep space. So.
Heading back out again,
Yeah.
it won't be back.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you, while you were on board ISS, a question I'll ask you about, looking out into space, what did the sky look like looking out from ISS?
So if you're on the side of the Earth that has the sun, and the sun is in the sky, if you look at space, I wouldn't say it's black. It's more of I would say a grayish look to it. You don't see any stars. But on the dark side, at night, you can see more stars than you can see on Earth. They're clearer. It's absolutely spectacular. Now, if you were going to Mars, you'd always have the sun in the sky, right?
Sure.
So I don't know how much how much of the stars and planets you would actually be able to see.
Yeah, I've always imagined if you're looking away from the sun, you're on the nighttime side of the Earth, and
Yeah.
ISS looking out, you'd probably have a nice view of the night sky.
Yeah. Clearly, if the sun is on the other side of the Earth, you got a great view of the stars.
Yeah. So on board ISS, what was a day like? What's a day
Day's
like
long.
on ISS?
I mean, you wake up, you're at work. You get up about 6 o'clock in the morning. I would usually get up around 30 minutes before I had to do something, which is generally the same thing I do on Earth. But it's a long day. You spend a third of your time doing science experiments, a third of your time just taking care and doing the stuff you need to keep the space station operating, and then about a third of the time repairing hardware. The space station, for kids in here, I don't know if a lot of the kids realize, but they have never been on Earth with all the people at one time. Because we've had people in space for 18 years.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so, and the space station's been there since the first modules launched 20 years ago, so it takes a lot of care and feeding of the systems, but we've been pretty good at keeping the space station operating, so you spend a lot of time doing that. Generally, you finish your workday about 12 hours after it starts, a few hours in the evening to do some personal things, whether it's communicating with your family, watching TV or a movie or something, or taking pictures of the Earth, and then you go to sleep. You're still at work. You wake up again. You do it all the next day.
What's your favorite part of the day?
In space?
Yeah. Your favorite part of the day in space?
Probably in the evening when I was done with all my work and I could get on the phone and talk to Amiko or some other people and finish some personal things. Spacewalks were certainly an incredible experience, but they are challenging. They're physically and mentally. They are what I call type 2 kind of fun. Type 1 fun is the thing that's fun when you're doing it, like a roller coaster. Type 2 is the thing that's fun when you're done.
Yeah, and you spent considerable time out in a spacesuit. Comfortable in a spacesuit?
It's not comfortable.
Not comfortable, okay. But
Yeah, it's, the joints don't really work like our joints. You're always working against them, so it causes a lot of astronauts have shoulder issues and elbow issues because of the spacesuits. The suit's pressurized at 4 psi, so you're always working against it. It can get hot in the suit, even though you have a cooling system. Sometimes it's just easier to just get hot or cold than it is to take the effort to adjust the cooling on the suit if you're tired. So there are a lot of challenges, but again, type 2 kind of fun.
Right. Just so everybody knows about this, one of my favorite space facts is that International Space Station flies over Philadelphia between 4 and 7 times every day, at least 4 times a day and as many as 7 times every day. And so there are times when you can see it, but when it is visible, you can see it naked eye with no problem at all. I've seen it in downtown Center City, Philadelphia, probably 40 or 50 times without any problem whatsoever. So I encourage you to look up online when it's available so you can go out and see it and wave at the astronauts as they go by.
I think it's the third brightest thing. I mean, clearly the moon's brighter. I think Venus is brighter.
Venus is
But it's
brighter?
the next brightest thing after Venus.
So it's very
Oh, and the
easy to
sun.
see.
We got to
And
include the
Well,
sun.
there is that too. But
Fourth
yeah.
brightest.
So what's next for a guy like you? You've had amazing experiences as a pilot, as a flight engineer, as a commander, space shuttle missions, the most complex machine ever built. Now this 1 million pound football field size object in space carrying astronauts from all over the world, doing fabulous experiments. You spent longer in space at one shot than anybody else. What do you do now?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to New York, and then on Saturday we're going to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Wow, great.
Not as tourists.
I was going to
though,
say they measure right up there
Yeah.
with.
I don't know. I've been really busy since I got back, almost too busy to think about doing something else with writing, a few books and the public speaking I do. I am did a little, filmed a TV commercial recently that'll be on TV. That'll be interesting to see what people think of that. For no, I'm not going to say, but I might not be allowed to.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But you may see it. And then some little odds and ends. I'll figure something out here eventually, though.
Okay. So let's see. While you were on board ISS, spent all this time, lots of different experiments, all sorts of experiences. Is there anything now that you're back, is there anything that you wanted to do that you didn't get to do? Leave anything on the table that you wanted to do?
Not really professionally, but certainly personally in space, especially once you get back, you're like, man, I wish I would have filmed this or taken a picture of this or called this person. Just take advantage of the unique opportunity. But from a professional perspective, I felt really, really lucky. I was at NASA for 20 years, almost always assigned to something, whether it was a space shuttle mission or being the backup of a space crew to the space station. Got to fly on a shuttle twice as the pilot and the commander. My first flight was to Hubble, so I got to go see the Hubble Space Telescope. Then my second flight to the space station, flew twice in the Soyuz, lived there for nearly a year on my second flight, got to do 3 spacewalks, I've been in space with 40 different people, which, the people are what makes this an experience even more enriching, that you get to do this as part of a team with, people that you enjoy working with. So nothing on a professional level.
Great. What's it take to be a good astronaut?
Teamwork, attention to detail, the technical, be able to operate technically complex systems on the space station. You have to be able to do a lot of different jobs. It's not only about being a scientist or an engineer, it's about being the plumber, the IT guy or girl, the electrician, the doctor, the dentist. Actually repaired people's teeth in space.
Wow.
You just kind of have to be sort of a jack of all trades. But the most important thing, absolutely, is being able to, play well with others and, work as part of a team. Spaceflight, I say, is the biggest team sport there is.
So, what did you feel was more challenging to you to deal with when you were in space? The physical hardships or the mental hardships?
I don't know which. I would say, for me personally, it was. I don't know. They're different. The physical stuff of living in space is the fluid shift that occurs in your body. In gravity is pushing all of our blood down to our feet, and our hearts and our cardiovascular system are trying to supply our organs, including our brain, with blood. So we have more blood than we really need in the absence of gravity. And when you go to space, that fluid redistributes itself. You get it, your head swells up, you're congested, it feels weird, and it never goes away completely, even after a year. The carbon dioxide on the space station, when it's at its lowest, is 10 times what it is on Earth. That's uncomfortable for some people. And then the psychological challenges are not insignificant. My 2 worst days I ever had in space were when it had to do with issues with my family members on the ground. First one was when Gabby was shot and I was in space. I still had 3 months to go and couldn't come home. And my worst moment on this year in space was getting a call from the control center in Houston, and they say, hey, you need to call your daughter Samantha immediately. It's an emergency. So I go down to my crew quarters, I get on the phone, and then the comm gets cut off for like 20 minutes.
Whoa.
I'm thinking, like, what's going on? Not able to talk to anybody. Eventually, we get the satellite link back. I call her, I say, Samantha, what's wrong? And she says, well, Dad, I'm at Uncle Mark and Gabby's house, which was in Arizona. She's there visiting them. She goes, I'm in their house, and they both went out of town. her cousins, Claudia and Claire, went out with their friends. She says, I'm in the house all alone, and I'm lonely. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute. What? She goes, I'm lonely. I'm like, Samantha, I'm in space for a year, and the emergency is you're lonely? I'm like, there are 7.5 billion people down there. Go outside and find one of them. This is my 21-year-old daughter, not the little kid.
So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, this is the season right now for students that are participating in the first Lego team workshops and things of that sort. And so we do have a question here. There's a first Lego team that would like to send a therapy pet into space as their project. How do you feel about sending a therapy pet into space?
It's a good question. Not a question I've ever been asked.
Thank you.
A couple of things. Well, first of all, there's this Lego League. I didn't know anything about this until this year. Their project was space, and they suggested that they go find an astronaut and ask them questions. I get like 10 emails every single day from these robotics leagues around the world. And you can't answer all of them. And some of them, I got one like a month ago, and it was like some kid in the rainforest in the Amazon. He's like, hey, can you answer my question? And by the way, can you do it quickly? Because I had to walk 10 miles to get to a computer. And I'd like you to like answer it before I get back. So I get these questions all the time from kids around the world to help with their projects, and it's really unfortunate that I can't answer all of them. But I will answer this one, and that is, what kind of pet? I mean, can you, like the mini horse that you see on airplanes sometimes?
Yeah, maybe a little smaller than that.
Really?
Like a cat, maybe.
No giraffe? Therapy
No
giraffe?
Maybe a snake.
We had mice on board that we did some experiments with. We had 20 female mice. And, at first they kind of look like us. They don't look like they're feeling good. They're like sick. Their fur gets all messed up.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. They're suggesting perhaps a bearded dragon.
Is that a lizard?
I think it's a lizard, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there are probably better ways to deal with that stress. And I think if you had an astronaut that needed a therapy pet, you should probably just get a new astronaut. No offense to your project. Just keeping it real.
So I think we do have to ask a couple of questions. Franklin Institute is a place where we pride ourselves on providing a comfortable and safe environment for people to learn about science. And we strive to inspire curiosity about STEM subjects. What do you say to kids that are curious about pursuing a STEM career? STEM is a big part of space exploration. And we're having huge challenges in this country right now around STEM education. You have some thoughts about what we might be able to do about helping kids become more interested in STEM topics?
Well, the STEM fields are incredibly important to our country, our national security, our economy, the sciences, engineering, math. I mean, those are the fields that, create things of, technical things and build things which are incredibly important. But being a kid myself that was not motivated to study, I could not find any motivation, was really not even possible for me. Every year I would show up in school and I'd be like, I am going to get straight A's. And then, day 3, I'm 3 days behind on homework. So for me, what I tell kids is, find what you're passionate about. Find the thing that inspires you, this spark that, motivated me was the book, The Right Stuff. So I think you need inspiration and things that let you discover the thing that you want to do in life that is important to you. So I think it's very important we encourage kids to study STEM education, but also everything. Let them figure out what they are interested in, and I think if someone's interested in something, they're going to do better at it.
So in your time on board Space Station, you saw lots of astronauts come and go. How does NASA choose astronauts, and which ones are going to stay and which ones are going to go on Space Station? And that sort of process that goes into figuring out who can be there for those periods of time.
Well, I've been part of the astronaut selection board as one of the people that decide who becomes an astronaut, and that decision is we're looking for people that are qualified, that have the skills and the ability and the background to do the job, but also people that work well as part of a team. But really, when it comes down to it, the people we interview are all qualified. Really, it comes down to who would you rather spend time in space with? Who do you really like and think that would be better office mates or workmates? Mm-hmm. That's kind of really what it comes down to. As far as assigning people to particular missions, I've never been in that role to decide who gets to go, launch, when, what they do. It's generally in the U.S. up to the chief of the astronaut office has a lot to say about that. They have different things that are important to them. Most of the time, though, especially on the space station crews, there's so many moving parts. Mm-hmm. Who you wind up being up there with is somewhat random, actually. It's which is kind of odd. You'd think there would be a lot more thought put into a space station crew, making sure that these people can work well together as a team. It's actually more like, this whole group has been vetted, therefore we should be able to put all of them together and they should work. It should work out fine.
Mm-hmm. Right, I was going to ask that question about, do you just trust the judgment of the astronaut office as to who they've chosen to be there with? I mean, you're locked up. I mean, I sort of think about this like you're going on an extended vacation with your family in the station wagon. You're all locked in there together, and the trip is 6 months long. Yeah. Not necessarily a good outcome.
Could be.
Could be. Okay.
We've been pretty lucky so far. I've never really seen much conflict in space. I've heard about, people having like personal issues with their fellow crewmates, but I've seen a little bit of that firsthand, but I've never really experienced it myself. We do a pretty good job of vetting people for this job.
So right on the heels of that, what was the scariest moment you ever experienced?
Well, if the worst moments were the two I talked about,
right.
Things with family members on the ground. Scary in space, I wouldn't say anything was ever like boo kind of scary, Mm-hmm. But,
right.
There's certain moments that get your attention. I was on my second spacewalk, I was outside. It was the end of the spacewalk. We were really tired. The control center asked me to go to this area on the back of the truss, which is the part that holds the solar rays. I wasn't too familiar with. The sun goes down, and then I kind of get turned upside down, and I kind of get lost in space.
Not too scary.
No, it took me a while.
17,500 miles an hour, 220 miles up. No, not scary at all.
It took me a while to figure out where I was, and so a little bit apprehensive, probably even more just embarrassed, right? Be able to fess up of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know where
I am. So speaking of crews a little bit more, there must be a special bond that you have with people you've spent time with on Space Station. What's that like? Do you ever get to see those folks these days? Your companion, Mikhail, hopefully you've seen him since then. And how would you compare how the two of you have sort of reacclimated to being back on Earth?
So one of the greatest things about this job is, the people you spend time in space with and the people you get to work with on the ground. And those having this shared incredible experience really makes those bonds very strong. I've seen Misha a number of times. He will be my friend for the rest of my life. We saw him a couple of months ago in Minsk in Belarus. I'll see him next summer. Hopefully I'll see him before then. So you form very strong ties with these people. Once you get back, though, you don't get to see them that much anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad. Right, so we've had plenty of questions from our audience. I'd like to give you some time for some closing comments.
Well, thank you very much. Great questions, by the way. And I just wanted to leave everyone with just one last thought before you guys head off home here at, not too late, but just one last thought, and that is, when I was leaving the space station for the last time, and keep in mind, this is a place I've spent 500 days of my life on, and I'm in the Soyuz, and we're backing away, I'm looking at the truss, the part I could see out the window, and I'm thinking, we built this 1 million-pound structure the size of a football field while flying around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour in a vacuum, in extremes of temperatures of plus and minus 270 degrees, built by an international partnership of 15 different countries, different languages, different cultures, different technical ways of doing things, putting these modules together, some of which had never touched each other before on Earth, put together by astronauts and cosmonauts in these incredibly difficult suits to work in, that this space station, this is the hardest thing we've ever done. I think harder than going to the moon. And if we can do this, we can do anything. If we want to go to Mars, we can go to Mars. If we want to cure cancer and we put the resources behind it, we can do that. If we want to fix our problems with the environment, challenges in our country, which clearly we have many right now, challenges in your, professional or personal lives. After spending a year in space, I was absolutely inspired that if we can dream it, we can do it if we work together as a team. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.